everyone. This is Elizabeth, and we are doing a beautiful New Earth conversation, an exciting one that I have been looking forward to, and we had to reschedule at one point because of a death in the family, but the perfect timing to come into the new year. We get to talk to Richard Rudd, the author of The Gene Keys, Unlocking the Higher Purpose Hidden in Your DNA. And DNA is one of those things that I absolutely love so much, and I just want to thank you, Richard, for coming on to my little show and gracing us with your incredible wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure, Elizabeth. And welcome to everyone who's listening and around the world.
Awesome. Yes, we have lots of different folks from all over right now, in the United States, over in Australia, in the UK, and in Israel. So welcome, everyone. All right, so let's hop into our little conversation here. I have been really just eating up this book, and it's hard to pick different parts of it to even talk about because it's woven together in this very beautifully powerful and mystical way. And like anything truly mystical, it comes directly from source energy. It comes from that beautiful plane of existence that we're all part of. The true internet is what I like to call it, because it's this place of true and total knowledge that is accessible to all of us. And sometimes we get that wonderful opportunity to actually look at objects like a book that come directly from that. And if you actually have this book, you can feel it when you pick it up. The minute I got it in the mail, I knew I had something quite special. But a lot of it's based in really ancient Eastern wisdom, such as the I Ching. And I did read the foreword to your book, Richard, and you mentioned a wonderful teacher of yours, Ra Uru-Hu, who was the person who created the concept of human design, and he taught you a lot about the mystical math of the I Ching. And I've only just started to delve into the I Ching. So I wanted to kind of come from this position of very new, newly looking at the power of the I Ching and how it can help us take charge of our lives and empower us to really be creator beings. Would you mind speaking a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. The I Ching is a very ancient Chinese text. In fact, it's more than a text. Originally, it's a system of symbols. There are 64 of them. And they're made up of lines, broken lines and straight lines. They're called yin and yang. We've probably heard of that. And when you combine these yin lines and yang lines in certain ways, you end up with these 64 permutations, and they're called hexagrams. So originally it was a system that a mystic, an ancient mystic somewhere 5,000-6,000 years ago, kind of intuited by living out in nature. And actually the legend is that he saw the shape of the I Ching in the back of a turtle, in a tortoise's back, a turtle that had just crawled out of the river, and he was gazing at it, and in the interlocking nature of its hexagonal shell, he saw this kind of map of the entire cosmos. And out of that, grew this system. And then wise men and women added to it over the generations, over thousands of years. And so it became this body of knowledge, a bit like the Bible in that sense, that people added to it, like this text. And it was used in lots of different ways. It was originally used as a kind of spiritual discipline as a kind of mirror of the cycles of existence, of life and death, and the events of destiny of our daily lives. And so people started to use it as an oracle, like you might throw a dice, or you might might open a set of cards like tarot cards, and then you would use them in an oracle type way. And there were a lot of different variations when you would originally they would throw these 6 sticks in different ways, and then they would get a divination. So that was one of its uses, but actually not the use that I most commonly use it for. I sort of went into it as a body of wisdom that talked about everything in the universe. And so every time you look into one of these hexagrams, or one of these, I call them now gene keys, you would see, an aspect of the whole. And you'd see that almost like a fractal, if you know what a fractal is. Like, so the way you look at one thing is how you look at everything. So if you look at, if you slice open a grapefruit, then in that half of the grapefruit is a pattern, and that pattern has a direct similarity to the wheeling nebula in the heavens. So they're very similar. So and you can look in nature and you can see these replicating patterns. And that's what the I Ching is all based on, these replicating patterns. And so when you understand those patterns mentally, that's one thing, because you can then begin to see them everywhere. But when you understand them physically and emotionally, then you begin to feel them everywhere, and you begin to come into harmony with life and with nature, and also with higher forces, with hidden forces. And that's what the I Ching's really about for me, as a system of coming into harmony with life, with others, and with the purest future, your purest future. So yes, you're right to mentioning Ra, who was a great teacher I had, and he's left this earth now, and he was a great person to introduce me to how to apply some of those formulas to one's life. And then I did move on from his teachings and carried on in my own direction, and that's what came to form this body of knowledge called the Gene Keys. So the I Ching is very much underpins it. And since you mentioned DNA and the book connects with that, I'll probably just mention that now, that the same structure that the biologists have found in human DNA, with these 64 codons built out of groupings of 6 and triplets, is exactly the same mathematical code as the Chinese man discovered all those thousands of years ago. It was the same code, with the same structure, which is quite a remarkable thing. So what he discovered or saw is a kind of universal code that's universal to all life forms, and that's why I think the book and the knowledge has this kind of physical resonance, this emotional resonance when people go into it, because it does relate very much to the pattern of our being, that we're formed of, these patterns of DNA. So yeah, it's a long introduction, but gives you a way
Absolutely
into perhaps the I Ching in a new way.
Yeah, and there's nothing quite like the I Ching that exists, and especially considering that obviously the mystics of that age didn't know that in the future we'd be looking at things from a different vantage point in science, but all of it's been validated. That beautiful patterning in life, and that we do actually live in a fractal universe, and that now we get these incredible views of how that looks, and getting to zoom out and look at, say, the supercluster that our galaxy is part of, the Laniakea cluster, and how the same patterns are existing there. It's kind of like the ancient adage, as above, so below. It's this guiding principle that shows up, but it's not just in one dimension, and that it's in multiple dimensions, in all of the dimensions that exist in this universe, and that this is this subtle, very beautiful guidance that's continuing to shape form. And you, of course, mentioned DNA as this incredible aspect. It's like a technology. And when I ask my angels, where did this DNA technology come from, usually my angels have a lot of information they can share, but they don't even know, which is pretty surprising to me because they're really old. But the DNA is a transducer of light. That's something that popped out when I was reading about you describing how the I Ching and DNA are interrelated in this fractal universe. When you say transducer, I would love to kind of unwrap that particular word because it's different than, say, the DNA being just a superconductor. But could you kind of open up that concept of the DNA being a transducer of light with us today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that word, what it relates to is it's something. It's a chemical signature, DNA, that it's one of its roles is to kind of lead. That's what the word means, to lead the light out. To transduce and to pull it through from one dimension to another. So it's almost like a wormhole in that respect. It kind of, because DNA itself is a spiral helix, right? So it creates this vortex everywhere in the body, and it's also, in a way, it's the last. I always look at it as the last. It's kind of the last aspect of our physicality before you reach the atomic realm, the subatomic realm, which is almost beyond the physical. So it's in a way, it's the last line of the physical. It gets that small, and so it's right on the edge of the kind of event horizon or the boundary of our body, of our physicality. So it's perfectly poised to bring through information from higher dimensions or from other dimensions, and that's my understanding of it. And of course, it's in every single fiber of our being. And I think there are all kinds of sort of ideas about how much DNA is in our body, and if you took all the DNA in your body and you unraveled it and you stretched it out, it would stretch to 10 billion miles or 100 million miles or something. There's so much of it inside us. And so if you think about that, and you think that every single cell of your being is packed with this substance, and this substance has it's one of its major purposes is to actually pull through information, to be a siphon of information between dimensions. It tells you kind of what a human being really is, that we are actually a kind of vessel for universal forces and wisdom to pass through us, and it's through that you're that you can connect to those other beings. Everyone can connect to their fractal line, their kind of specific line of geometry in the cosmos, and the guides and the entities, or if you want to look at it that way, or you could even go wider. And you could go, well, there's no separation, so there's no other beings. They're just aspects of the one consciousness. And so it's all different kind of ways of looking at how this receptacle inside us, this DNA, is actually a kind of conduit for light. And I think light is the real key, because light, when I say light, I don't mean light, the physical light. I mean the substance of the cosmos, the consciousness of the cosmos, the love of the cosmos, that force, light that is everywhere in the cosmos, the light of Christ or the light of God or the light of, however you want to, whatever you want to, what words you want to use to talk about that. It's the divine essence. And so that's what the DNA is really all about for me.
That's amazing, and as I've heard other people talk about it a little bit like that, but you had a really beautiful way of describing the DNA as this transducer, as this vortex pulling light through, and it's exactly how I see it too, that when you really understand that you are more than just a physical body in the 3D, that you are a consciousness, and the way that I see people is that they are souls. They are these beings of light that actually live on an entirely different dimension than the 3D. but that our intelligence is moving through and into this form in the 3D, and that the DNA is the master of allowing that intelligent light to move through, and that each individual is really part of that huge plane of force, that intelligent light that pulls all these dimensions together and creates this sense of oneness in this beautiful universe. But it is the source of all of it, the source of all of us, and that the idea of free will is quite spectacular, that this experiment in consciousness on the earth is all about us asking ourselves, what's it going to take? We are born as these wonderful beings of light into these bodies, into the body of a little baby at a certain time in space, because we're falling through or moving through space, and all the alignments of the spheres and the entire galaxy, all of these things affecting that beautiful moment, even at conception. And then as we move through, what's it going to take for us to reach that conscious state of oneness? That's really what the experiment's all about. And that for each of us, it's going to be a different journey to that state of oneness again. But that, of course, when the body goes, we go back into oneness, just like everyone else does. But you described that kind of reaching that oneness state as a supernova status, where we're collapsing the vortex and allowing it fully, purely to move through us at all times. It's a state of consciousness. It's that limitless state of consciousness. And I think the one big question I get from most people is, well, how do I keep that going? How do I attain it, and how do I keep it going? How do I live in the 3D and also have this very fractal, fifth-dimensional experience where I'm aware of all these possibilities constantly? And I can't say that I'm 100% supernova status, but I do try to help people complete that whole circle, get them on the right path in the same way as you, enlightening that beautiful path, brightening it up so that they can be conscious of it and what it looks like for each of them. And that's that unique holographic profile. And it's exactly what I see when I do sessions for people. I see this holographic image of a person, and it's all these incredible, beautiful spiritual structures that half my job is just to decipher what I'm perceiving, and that everyone actually has that ability to tap into these deeper pieces of information coming through multiple dimensions, and that it's all the same part and parcel, this incredible intelligent light. But if you were to sort of talk to the average person about this supernova status and collapsing, this idea of separation, what are some of the things that you often get asked about when the average person learns about this?
Yeah, I don't really know many average people, but I know exactly what you're asking, and it's a really good question, how to make this practical. And I'm always considering that. One of the things, I was saying to you at the beginning, I just finished a short book this last year, and in it, it's called The Art of Contemplation, and it's not available yet. It'll be available in a few months. And I mention it because I think that when everyone in their life has some fragment or memory of that state, and maybe it came when you were young, maybe you had an experience, at the birth of your child, or maybe you had an elevated experience sitting out with nature one day, or while making love to someone, or whatever it is. There are elements that we have where we hit that state, and suddenly we remember it. And usually those experiences are quite fleeting. and we wish for them to come back, and we wish we could live in that state, and it's a quite natural wish. Who wouldn't want to? And so what I've crafted in a way out of my teaching is ways to rekindle those states, and ways to, that's why I call it the art of contemplation, because you are almost circling that state. You contemplate it. You don't kind of rush at it in a stressful way, in a kind of very hungry, I want it now way. You have to circle it gently. And that means you contemplate it, and you and you can do that in many different ways. Maybe you learn to meditate, maybe you do some yoga, maybe you go on retreats, maybe you read sacred texts, maybe you just are out in the world being of great service, maybe all of those. But all of those things are kind of methods in which you're contemplating this central sun, this supernova at the core of you. And it's there. And our job is to just find ways, creative ways, to keep it alive, to keep it burning. And sometimes it feels like it's gone out, in our dark moments. We feel like it's just missing completely. But it never actually is, because if you go inside your heart, even in a dark moment of your life, there's some, during a tragedy or whatever it is, or when you feel like your heart's shut down, if you go inside the depth of your being, you'll always find in the darkness there a tiny, tiny little ember. And that ember, it cannot be extinguished. It's like the eternal atom of the divine inside us. It is inextinguishable, even if you feel like it isn't. So contemplation is an art where you gently fan that flame, that tiny little ember, and you bring your heart back to life. And it's a job that we all have to do. We all have to learn for ourselves, and we can help each other. But most of all, we have to help ourselves and find our own route. And through the Gene Keys, I call that your higher purpose. Finding your higher purpose in life. And it's not just your purpose; it's your higher purpose. There's everyone is here to do something great, I think. And I don't mean great as in hallelujah out there in the world, I've been a huge success materially or anything like that. It's just something great is something beyond yourself, something that snaps you out of your self-obsession, something that serves something greater than yourself, something that serves others, that serves the world, that serves the plan, if you like. And so that's what the Gene Keys are all about. They're about helping you to move through those shadow states by transforming them, those difficult states, those places when we feel, lost or bereft or lonely or angry or cut off or just miserable for whatever reason, depressed, or just longing, longing for more. And it's about taking those states, so they're the raw material. There's in those states is the ember, that tiny little ember. And it's about coaxing that ember to life, and then over time, as we do this, that ember burns more brightly, and it's easier to find inside us. And it takes years, it just takes years. I mean, some would say it takes lifetimes. But even in a single lifetime, it takes years. And so you have to be very patient, and you have to be, you have to draw encouragement from others who have gone beyond us, and let them be our inspiration. And whether that's people who've been great teachers, or whether it's people we know who we admire, or whether it's angelic beings who we can connect with. It's all about knowing that that supernova inside us of light is our final eventual destiny. And that one day we will get there. And if you really, really, really remember that, and you keep on remembering that, and then that's the magic. That's what creates the difference between a person, just living an ordinary sort of horizontal life, or someone who's really, really living life at its zenith, living their higher purpose. And I think that's what I'd say about it. I hope you know what I mean.
Mhm. Wow, that was perfect. Thank you.
Mm.
I call that practicing with light, and I try to teach people a little bit about what different kinds of practices of light are going to be like. It's going to be different for everyone, and that each person has things that they do and that bring more light into their life. And so for one person, maybe when they were a little kid, they used to love to draw, but as they got older, they stepped away from the magic of being able to create that artwork. But bringing that back online, helping people to attain more light in their life through different kinds of practice. So for me, it's singing and playing the piano. It's something I treasure. I keep it very sacred, and I treat that as a way to bring light into my life. And then playing with literal light, too, because literal, actual light from the sun has an incredible effect on the DNA. It regenerates the DNA. And that there's these frequencies and wavelengths that we've discovered more deeply about. Like, for example, in the book you mentioned that people are going to continue to discover more incredible things about light and DNA, and that light is actually not only a particle but a wavelength, and that it also, when we look at it, that our perception will change what light does by just us perceiving it, which is a bit mind-blowing. And just further example of how light actually is very intelligent. But that DNA is intelligent. It's like a rewritable CD, and that you're born with an incredible amount of information on that CD. But what I like about the gene keys is that they unlock really specific concepts, these frequencies that are written on that CD, perhaps, and that these nuanced concepts, they're very specific. They bring out this ongoing access, this spark, to this spark which is perhaps, I like to call it divine imagination and divine knowing. These beautiful sparks within us that these nuanced words in the gene keys, they bring out that energy, which makes this book so rich and could actually be very overwhelming if you actually tried to sit down and read it like a normal book, because it's not a normal book. When you, like, even, I didn't have a chance to read the entire thing before we spoke, because I'm fairly new
not
at
surprised.
but I read a good portion of it, and even then, I could get through sections and I'd have to sit with it because it had so much energy. Like, last night I read about freshness, and I believe that's the first gene key. And I was reading about freshness, and I had to pause. I had to walk away and let that sit in my body, the frequency of freshness. And it did. It brought up a whole bunch of things for me to look at, because it magnifies areas that are harmonized in our bodies. It magnifies areas in the DNA which are harmonized, and then it also makes it very clear what's not harmonized. And you really deftly were able to expand on the shadow part, and you didn't do it in a roundabout way. You brought it forth in this really wonderful way. A lot of people are talking about shadow work, but they don't ever really do it. They don't really get into it. And you've made this very complete, easy way for us to easily look at those shadow pieces. We don't deny them. Instead, we learn about them. We open them up. And eventually turn it into oneness within the self by processing it through all the way, and then it changes the writing on our CD, on that DNA, and you feel it in your body. But you have to be really aware of it when you're going in, or else I could see how it could get really overwhelming at first. Have you heard people describe that when they are going through these gene keys? Have you heard
Yeah.
people talk about how it's a little hard to, it's so much energy.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I experienced that myself early on in my own process for many years, actually. Just the overwhelm of opening up these difficult states, these shadow states. So it's not like you even have to open them up because they appear in our lives all the time anyway. But giving them sort of space, inviting them in for a cup of tea, and then spending time with them instead of trying to distract yourself from them, which is the standard practice for most people. When we feel uncomfortable, we try and change it unconsciously, and few of us have the kind of will or perhaps the valor to just sit and face it. But I think it keeps returning, demanding that we sit and face the uncomfortable feeling, and most of the time, we miss the magic because we don't go deep enough into it. And it's not about wallowing in it at all. It's about, I have a very practical 3 steps, which is called allow, accept, and embrace. And the first is you just allow the state. If it's anger, if it's fear, if it's terror, if it's panic, if it's, overwhelm, whatever it is, it could be numbness, whatever it is, you just allow it to be what it is inside you. You don't have to like it. In fact, you can hate it. You can be really angry with it. But allowing is just a very, non-invasive, gentle approach towards yourself, your inner self, what you're feeling. And then allowing may go on for some time, that it just gives a little bit of space between you and the state. And if you're in a relationship, for example, it can give you a pause before you react to another pattern that someone, with someone. So it gives you that little bit of space that then just allows you to breathe and be aware, this is my pattern. This is not, I don't have to launch off down that difficult track of blaming something else or someone else. This is mine. I'm going to own it. And then after a while, allowing turns into accepting. And accepting is when it moves deeper into your being, into the fabric of who you are. And the pattern, if it's whatever it is, if it's anger or depression or sadness or, one of those states, it begins to sort of change inside you, and you begin to become accustomed to it. And it's almost like it's still not something that feels good, because it just doesn't. But it's something that you're no longer overwhelmed by. It's something you're no longer triggered by all the time. It's something you're kind of on top of. You're getting to know it, and that's great. It's almost like you're befriending it. Some of the ancient Sufi teachers, that's what they say. They befriend your enemies. And instead of it being your enemy, you draw it close. And then embrace is when you've gone on doing that for a long time, and eventually that it transforms inside you. And it's exactly what you said, Elizabeth. It's the very thing that was dark inside you actually reveals light. It reveals its higher purpose. So everything, in the Gene Keys world, the kind of central piece is the expression, every shadow contains a gift. Every shadow contains a gift. And if we harvest that shadow, the gift will come, and it will transform into light, and it will transform into grace. And then you're on the other side, and that's embrace. You've embraced it fully, and then it's actually been purged from your DNA, that pattern. And you might say it's a karmic pattern, and you've cleansed the karma, and so it's gone. It's actually been burned from your DNA. And as you said, you can feel it physically. You feel lighter. You feel like you've dropped something. You feel like you've shed something. And we have almost like a finite amount of these shadows, and as we move through them one by one after another, we move deeper and deeper into the matrix. More and more light begins to emerge through our DNA and out into our lives, and that's where we begin to come. It picks up speed, right? And you become lighter and brighter, and it becomes easier. Over time, it actually, that's my words of encouragement to anyone doing shadow work. Is it becomes easier over time. And there are times where you just think, this thing just goes on forever. I can't do it anymore. and we've all been to those, places. But it does get lighter. I assure you. So, yeah, that's and Gene Keys is all about that shadow work but transmuting it and moving through it, and then finding the joy that's on the other side. Yeah, the release.
Yes, and my teacher, Lucia Renee, she teaches specifically about what we would call emotional processing. It's very similar, welcoming the feelings, it's really standing in it, discovering it. And this is all part and parcel of a sort of broader perspective, which we would call epigenetics, that when we do this kind of processing, it is truly that. We are rewriting our DNA. And this is broadened quite a lot as an incredible place for us to examine, and more people are coming into epigenetics from pretty hard sciences like biology and genetics, moving into epigenetics, saying, well, okay, we can manually go in and switch genes around and turn things on and off, but we don't really understand exactly, still hardly at all, how all these things are interrelated, how their relationships express our physical reality in these bodies. It's extraordinarily complex, but that we actually have the power already to do that ourselves without having to manually go in. And that this is ancient knowledge. This has been basically proven without a doubt from both the spiritual and the scientific perspective that we can do this. And I've seen incredible miracles happen when people are willing to stand in that presence, being present with that vibration or frequency that they're trying to shift, including beautiful health healing when people have even specific genetic issues, which always was very curious to me. I myself have a couple of inherited pretty major genetic problems, but I've been able to transform my own body through this presence with it, being able to not only embrace it, welcome it, and move through it, and then watching it transform from my heart outwards into the rest of myself. This is what is so incredible about the Gene Keys. It walks you through every piece of this finite list of shadows and light and the lessons we get from each of them. And it's super systematic, which really appeals to my logical brain. It's extremely mystical, which appeals to my spiritual brain. And it talks to the DNA. The words that you choose are so nuanced. It affects the thoughts. And even last night, I was really excited about this interview, and I was dreaming about the interview, but I was dreaming about what I had read in the book as well, and it kept coming up for me to literally process while I was in my dream state. The words about freshness, and then I also was looking at the 11th gene key, the light of Eden, talking about Eden consciousness coming to the planet, and also looking at the 55th gene key, and it was profound. It affected me to the point where it even was happening in my dreams, this incredible information unraveling, which, I was so moved. I woke up super nervous, which I don't ever get nervous really anymore, and I knew that was a good sign that I was on the right track, because it affects feelings, it affects moods, which incur an incredible amount of change in the DNA. So it encourages this dream state of contemplation, this place where we bring our bodies into stillness and presence, which is precisely the place where we can rewrite our DNA and change it directly to create physical and mental and emotional healing, but then this higher state of spiritual well-being. Have you heard multiple people talk about physical healing as they've discovered the gene keys?
Quite a few have, yes. I mean, it's funny for me because I'm something of a hermit, and I live a kind of very ordinary family life with my family here in England, and I occasionally travel around abroad and do courses and retreats and things, and I do quite a lot online, and I write, and you'd be surprised how I don't get a great deal of feedback. I mean, I do, but I hear it when I go out there, and I hear that people are having experiences of extraordinary things happening, and incredible hope burning in them that suddenly came alive, or it saved their marriage, or it helped them through cancer, or it helped them die, or their friend die, or it helped all these things. I think it's a knowledge beyond me. It's beyond any of us. It's the perennial wisdom. So it helps all kinds of people in all kinds of ways. I think it gives them the help that they need, and because it impregnated in the gene keys is these three levels: the shadow, and then the gift I spoke of, and then the siddhi is the third one. The siddhi is the divine light, and the word for the divine light that's hidden in that code. So if you mention like the first gene key, which you mentioned, is freshness, and then the shadow of that is this entropy, is this leakage of energy, this downward pouring out energy, this depressive energy, and then the freshness is the kind of blooming of that, and then at the top of that one, at the very peak, is beauty, and those three, entropy and freshness and beauty, are all interrelated in the same way as the seed and the flower and the fruit are related. The seed is the shadow, and then the flower is the blossoming of the gift of freshness, and then the fruit is beauty. And so that's a contemplative journey through that gene key and that you're describing. But the magic is really to hold the highest siddhi. The siddhi is a Sanskrit word that I borrowed because there isn't really one in English for a divine gift, for enlightened consciousness. But it's a specific kind of consciousness. There are many of them. There's 64 of them, and they're all one field. They're all that one supernova that you mentioned, but they're little different expressions of them through humans. So beauty is a peak expression of humanity, and it's what we all seek in some way. And a truly awakened being is a being who is beauty. They don't know it anymore. They don't seek it. They have become it. They have seen that there is nothing but beauty. And even the ugliest, most horrible things are part of the beauty of the divine, because everything suddenly falls into the perfection. And of course it doesn't look perfect because it's moving towards more and more and more perfection. But every step of that process is also perfect, as the consciousness of the whole is kind of expanding into itself, into its fulfillment. So it's really important to, while you're doing that shadow work, to hold those higher siddhis as well in your state of consciousness. You really hold them. And I often say to people who are working with the gene keys, I remind them, look, we're very good at doing the shadow stuff as humans, but actually we often forget that we have these other very higher aspects, and we can hold that as well. We need to hold that as the highest. That's almost the part that pulls us through. Those siddhis, those higher states, whether they're words like compassion and devotion or light or rapture, or there's 64 of them. Harmony, and to contemplate those words as part of our true nature helps us shift those shadow patterns into those gifts and then beyond. So I think that's a really important part of it, of the whole process.
Yeah, and these particular cities, they are far beyond all of us. They are, like you said, the expression of true oneness, all of that source energy through everything, and that's the discovery of it. And it pulls us through, it pulls us into that higher state. And all of those cities, they're around us all the time. They're coming as almost like frequencies from the Earth, from the Sun, from the galactic core of the galaxy, not only in a really beautiful, imaginative sense, but in a literal sense. There's literal frequencies encoded with those exact beautiful cities, these lessons, or there's not really a really great English word for it. But a lot of my friends and different people who are interested in mysticism, we talk about this concept of the new Earth, and you totally nailed it down. You said we're moving into this galactically, and in fact it's been happening. And you said that in 2012 we would align with the galactic center, and that indeed happened. And since then, especially over this past winter solstice, actually, which is why I feel like this has been an interview that has had some divine timing around it, because some incredible things energetically have happened during that solstice. We aligned again with the galactic center. It was really interesting. I heard a lot of people say there's all these beautiful codes we've aligned, and we're receiving more information from the planet, from the center, from the sun, and they call them codes. And that this has been bombarding the planet for many years, and it's shifting our DNA. It's rewriting us from the outside in, and then we can also do the same rewriting from the inside out, that those codes are really no different from the inside out, but it's that we're getting support from the outside and the inside to create this sense of true, total freedom, that connection to the divine imagination, and then, of course, really giving us the personal responsibility to be co-creators of our own lives, to be creator beings. What do you think about all of the help that we're getting? And I've heard a lot of people talk about crystalline DNA or reactivation of the DNA. Does that come into your personal life at all? Have you been clocking it, or what are your thoughts about that?
I think you mentioned the 55th gene key, and that was one for me when I wrote the book. I came to that one, and it was like, or it came to me, because they didn't come in order; they just came as they came, and that one came with a kind of clap of thunder, and or like a whirlwind, and it completely blew me away. And it was like 4 times as long as any of the other gene keys in writing it, and out of it came this whole storyline, and this whole story of the change, of the coming change. I call it the great change. The change to humanity, and the change that we're on the precipice of, and that 2012 is a marker, for one of the markers of the time we're in, and that this change is a period that we're moving through, in which this is where this is the part of the book that's very prophetic. And by the way, just on a practical note, you can on my website genekeys.com. I think if you go to the part on the book somewhere, I can't quite exactly remember where it is. It might even be. I think it's if you look into the book section. I think the 55th gene key is provided there for free as a PDF, so you can read it. And I really recommend it. You might have to burrow into the site to find it. I think it might be in the free resources section, where there are all kinds of webinars and articles I've written. It's somewhere in there. The 55, I think it's called. And in that is, so I explore this this kind of change to our DNA that's taking place, that will take place over an epoch, I think, and it may happen very quickly in evolutionary terms, but for DNA to actually mutate in a species, I think that that can happen quite quickly. But it also, what is quickly in evolutionary terms, that could be thousands of years, or hundreds or thousands of years. But if you look at it in a much wider way, that's actually quite fast. But we're in a very critical time right now where that's occurring. And there's no doubt about that, and I'm sure that's part of why the gene keys emerged and why we discovered DNA at this period, so that we can understand it in more depth and we can see the change. But science is not going to probably discover that for a while. But that doesn't mean we can't see it. The more sensitive people who are operating kind of ahead of the curve of science, because it is occurring nonetheless, and it is changing us as a species. It's changing the nature of how DNA operates. I don't know fully how that's going to look inside us. I kind of know the end result. The process of getting there is a mystery. It's like, wow, that's part of the creative impulse, and it's step by step. We just have to go on surrendering to it, and it will pull us through. And in that 55th gene key, though, I did outline some of the things I see that will change in us. The way our diet, our digestive system, the way in which we kind of metabolize. And we're going to metabolize more and more light. So our diet is going to become lighter. And that many of us won't be able to eat meat or processed salts and things that actually kind of damage the fine, the kind of refinement of that DNA, because it's creating a more refined vehicle so that we can pick up subtler and subtler wavelengths. Do you see what I mean? So that's why often these mystics who have discovered those states do have very refined, simple diets, in order that the body can kind of change and go through that mutation. And I think also the mutation will be passed on, into our DNA, into our children and our grandchildren, as an actual physical transmutation, so that it will be born into people, so they will be born more awake, or with a more refined set of apparatus. And so there you get the kind of idea of the indigo children, or the special children, or the chosen ones, and there are certain vehicles or bloodlines that are being kind of worked on, so that this new kind of super species can emerge. And I say that in a way, it's not about a kind of chosen ones so much as just it's like in early spring. In the early spring, the first few flowers pop up. Whether they're over here in southwest England, they're little snowdrops, they're called, because they pop up sometimes through the snow, and then slowly more things bloom, and as the summer kicks in, suddenly everything's in bloom. But it's those early ones that pop through. That's us. Just little early ones that happen to have awoken a bit earlier, and there's no kind of judgment in that. There's no kind of vanity in that. It's just it awakens where it awakens, and then it gets passed on. And I think I do see a whole rolling wave of awakening consciousness around the world occurring, and it means that we start to have these conversations across continents, and the internet helps that wave to kind of move to everyone who's listening to this call, for example, is being hit by a little bit of that wave as we're talking about it, and they'll carry it in some way and integrate it in whatever way they need to. And so that's, in that respect, I really understand what you're saying. Yes, it is something that's occurring to all of us. Yeah, it's a very powerful time of change.
Absolutely. And I love, as an anthropologist, I absolutely love the concept of the Homo sanctus, the sacred human, and looking as that is the ascended human, the human who can fully live in harmony with nature. It is Eden consciousness. It was the original point of this whole experiment, and why the planet planet Earth was chosen for us to learn more about how to be one with that plane of existence, that universal grid, the net of Indra, to tap into all of that and reflect the universe more perfectly within us. And I really appreciate that 55th key, because I felt like that was what the Earth was granted as an incredible gift, this galactic mercy, this Christ consciousness, incredible amounts of mercy and love, and that we can be transformed in that. I was expecting some really big, intense, overwhelming, even destructive energy to happen. And I was watching it very carefully come closer and closer to the Earth, with a group of 8 other people. Well, it was actually a whole group of 8, and mystics and seers and strategists and soldiers, and we were all watching this together. And I saw it as almost like an energy, of weaponized energy, this energy that was going to come and pull up and completely collapse the structural matrix around the Earth, allowing the Earth to be on this universal grid once more. And this is all happening in consciousness. And instead, what happened was this moment of time where suddenly it was all grace, it was all love, it was all mercy. But mercy was very key in that, and it was very much this Christ consciousness, heart-based energy bombarding my consciousness as we were walking through this sort of gateway. And I put all my armor down, and I realized, how much mercy am I giving myself? And that was what shook me to the core. I saw this collapse of this structural construct of the matrix around the planet, and then I witnessed this chance for all of us in our vulnerability to drop the victimization, like you mentioned in the 55th key, to drop the victimization and to come into a place of total and pure mercy within the self, and that was the gateway to this next step, this unity consciousness. And the Mayans, so wonderfully intelligent, very, very keen on how all the spheres work together, and this concept of time and being able to prophetically look deep into the future, talks about the 9th wave of consciousness on the Earth, and that, in fact, 2017 was the first sort of little bits and pieces of that 9th wave coming through, and that this year is all about the huge sort of tidal wave of that unity consciousness coming online. And it's different than, say, the global collective being aware of each other, which happened around 2009, where everyone was using the internet, and then suddenly we were all, oh, yeah, okay, we're all one race, gotcha. But this is beyond that, far beyond it. It's much more like, if we were going to say what we want to attain is the perfect reflection of the universe within, then it's much more leading us in that direction towards this galactic human, a human that has transcended the material and all of the systems that were built up around fear, and the systems we're watching right now very slowly crumbling to make way for the new. And that these chosen ones, or that these indigo children, rainbow children, crystal children, all of these wonderful beings who chose to come to the planet right at the perfect time to bring through a chance to rebuild all these systems from the ground up, to reflect, again, in a fractal way, a more perfect fractal, a more perfect reflection of the universe. And when I was reading the 55th, that's what was coming to mind about the timing right now, and how that's where we're at right now. We get to ask ourselves, not only are we ready fully to stop being victims of anything at all going on in our lives, in the 3D especially, or the victims of systems, or the victims of others and their perceptions, but to go inward and to ask, how much mercy, how much forgiveness am I willing to really take on? And around the fall equinox, I was brought to help support the idea of galactic forgiveness, that we could rewrite our DNA in a way that was very special at that time, to really say, all right, I'm not only going to forgive myself, I'm going to forgive everyone around me, I'm going to forgive anyone I've ever had contact with, I'm going to forgive all the generations of people from me onward that I'm related to. I'm going to forgive on their behalf any of the generational things that I might have picked up along the way, which I call genetic bondage, and it can look very much like entities being involved in people's lives, but also health issues and all sorts of things that we inherit in our DNA. But we forgive even beyond that, forgiving all the way to the edge of the universe. And as we forgave, we make room. We make room for mercy and incredible creative energy, co-creative energy with the universe, saying, all right, if I'm going to reflect the universe more perfectly in my life, how's that going to play out with how I do my little things? How's it going to play out when I'm cooking my food, when I'm being with my children? And then the ordinary is no longer ordinary, it's sacred, because it's incredible point in time. Linear time ends up being very precious because we end up getting to have a lot of fun moment to moment, bringing through all that reflection, that co-creative light. That's what I got out of reading the 55th Key, and I'm sure there's an incredible, much more information. It's one of those books where you're going to probably read part of it and then get something new out of it every time. And perhaps even for you, Richard, reading what you've already written and know so deeply, I'm sure looking at it again every day with fresh eyes, you've continued to build upon that incredible knowledge. But it really is the light of limitless consciousness, which we get to access right now.
Yeah. Well, I also I don't know if you're aware, I went through a journey of recording 64 audios on each gene key.
Wow.
Don't know if you heard any of those, because I wanted to experience them as an oral transmission as well as a visual written text, and so I spent 3 years contemplating them, and then doing an oral audio, each one about half an hour only, but just capturing in that half an hour a slightly different way of seeing it, and they're much, the book is quite, it's a little bit objective in some way, and so these oral ones have been, which are all on my website, by the way, and audios, they're very, very popular. They're kind of they're more in some respect they're more accessible. They're shorter, they're easier to digest, but they're also more subjective because I weave my own life stories into them. I tell stories. I read fragments of or recite fragments of things I've read, or poetry, or whatever's going on through me. So they have a different flavor to the book. But it's been a huge kind of another way of bringing it into another side of my brain, and I think, you know, people listen to them in all kinds of different ways, as you know, before they go to bed or on the way to school or whatever it is, just to kind of reset their day and remember. But that's been a really nice way for me to also explore in another direction, because I think each person, it's not about my voice either, it's about each person, as you said, finding what you find in there. And what I've done is I've just given a kind of an idea. This is what happened to me when I contemplated this one, and see what comes out for you and how it applies to your life, to your friends, to the people you know. And I'm really glad you mentioned the forgiveness piece, because that's almost on the other side of the opposite side of the matrix to the 55. It's a kind of wormhole. The 55 and the 22, although they're funny numbers, are kind of connected, and the 22 is the other one that stands out alone in a way. I don't know if you've read that one, but it is the great feminine transmission in the gene keys. It's the great feminine wisdom, and out of that comes this kind of story of the sacrificial nature of forgiveness and all those things you've mentioned, and the coming to terms with the human wound and the grace that comes from the feminine side of the matrix of life, and as opposed to the light, you know, it is a part of the light, but it's the crystalline light of mercy, what you call mercy and forgiveness, and that's it's what the ancients called the Shakti, as opposed to the Bhakti, and the Bhakti is the energy that rises up towards God or to the divine, and the Shakti is the kind of showering energy of light that descends and falls upon us like rain, the grace, the petals of grace that rain down upon us when we turn our view, you know, to the highest. So those, in the matrix of the gene keys are, you know, a lot of those stories, but particularly in those ones, 55 and 22, are kind of those magical moments connected to forgiveness, and connected also to all the great myths of forgiveness, like Christ, for example, and sacrifice, you know, which is something, you know, as an anthropologist, you'll know, it's in all the great creator myths around the world, is this myth of sacrifice, and it's much more than it seems, because we are the sacrificial lamb, and human, you know, Homo sanctus, and we have to go through this huge transmutation in which we're reborn and as our full self. And so we have to go down into these dark states and these suffering states in order that we can reemerge, you know, into the light, you know, and be that divine spark and all its potential.
Oh, yes. And that personal initiative to say, all right, I'm going to do it. No more waiting, no more beating around the bush. I'm going to do this. What does this look like for me? Using the tools that come into our lives to be able to do that. There's so many wonderful tools, and this is absolutely one of them. We have someone, Celine, from Vancouver, BC, actually, wrote in, and she was just talking about how she really loves the illumination of understanding really what is being human, and how human language helps us to understand that humanness better. And she has this little quote from T.S. Eliot that I think is perfect for what we're trying to unwrap here around grace as well. She says, we shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. That we, again, always going back to source, that's who we are, where we're from, and where we go back to, and that in our humanness we get this conscious ability through the 3D, which affords us the ability to enjoy linear time. Everyone hates on linear time. They're always like, well, time doesn't really work like that. It's cyclical. Yes, that's true. But linear time is a gift in our humanness, a chance for us to see how far and deep we can really go in order to attain that oneness state over and over again, and every moment hold on to it, or at least be it, embody it. So there's no more fighting, there's no more ego in that state, there's no more separation. And that's really what the true human, the Homo Sanctus, the sacred human journey is all about, and what that humanness is. I think that's really special and important to look at. So, Richard, would you be all right if we took a question from one of our listeners?
I'd be delighted.
So our first question is from Beth, and she's in San Rafael, California. Hi, Beth.
Hi. This is, I was able to get online a little bit late in the conversation, but I heard a lot of it, and I'm the one who emailed you about that question, so I got to be on it a bit.
Now I don't have to pretend I'm you, and you can.
No, you know what? I prefer you do it because I think it'd be really interesting if you asked.
Oh, sure.
You think. Yeah, that'd be great.
So let's do it together. So, Richard, Beth and I had this session, and when I do one-on-ones, I scan someone. It's actually very, very simple. I ask Source, please show me what this person needs to know about right now. And the only limitation really is time. So I'm able to see a lot of a person's physicality and very detailed physicality, but also their spiritual energy. And like you talk about the holographic profile really showing up, this is what I see. It's like a hologram. And in the person, we have structures sometimes that when we look at them closer, they open up even more dimensions of information. And so Beth didn't tell me. I like to go in literally with very little information, because the more information I get, the more apt I am to have expectations, and I try to go in with no judgment and no expectation. So with Beth, it was very similar, and we went in, and she did have some specific health problems she wanted me to examine, and a lot of times those sorts of health problems end up having a spiritual component. And when we were doing the session, there was this energy above her head that was very solid. And it was like a big, huge metal ball, and it was very heavy looking, like an iron ball, literally iron. And when I went to move it or shift it, appeared 3 women. And this has never happened before, and it was very unusual. And so I was listening to the genetic background about Beth from these 3, what we might call the 3 great-grandmothers. They were women who she was related to in the far past. That these are her genetic, her genetic people. And she ends up, she comes from this real specific line of people. Beth, what's the genetic line again? The Ashkenazi. And so I know a little bit about the Ashkenazi, but not a whole lot. So I was listening to what the women were saying, and it was almost kind of like tapping into a holographic movie. Like, the women weren't actually there necessarily, but I was listening to this information coming up, and they were describing how they had gone through an incredible amount of trauma, and that they had lost children, that they had problems with their blood and their iron, that they lost children because of it. They had a hard time. The land that they were on was bombarded by war, and they had a lot of starvation and death and poverty. And that Beth had inherited this incredible amount of trauma in her DNA, which we know now is actually fact, that these sorts of traumas can be inherited. And so Beth was really interested when she learned that I was going to be interviewing you about your thoughts, because she does suffer from these physical things that are coming up because of those genetic codes that were written in her DNA so long ago that just so happens to also be spiritually accessible to us. And as much clearing as that we could do around that, and to do some deep forgiveness work is what I suggested to her, that she help do the forgiveness work on behalf of that incredible genetic line. But I just wanted to present that to you, and I know, Beth, it wasn't exactly like a specific question per se, right? It was more like we wanted to get Richard's perspective on this concept. Is that right?
To get his perspective. Yeah, to get his perspective, and also to get more like meditations with forgiveness and meditate with whatever else I need to do. You said to contact them and help free them as well as myself.
Yeah. So that second piece, there's no need to do any direct contact. All that information is already inside you. All you have to do is to do it for yourself and within. And then it expands out. It reflects back upon that entire genetic line. It reflects back into time and helps to free up all of that trauma and all that pain. But I think, Richard, if you had some gene keys that might be coming up in your mind around this, what could Beth look at more carefully to help her clean up that DNA?
Well, thanks. It's good. It's a great question. It's nice to kind of meet you online, at least, Beth.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's and what you're talking about is ancestral DNA. You're talking about memories held in our DNA, and I have an expression called the fractal DNA, or a fractal line, is that we each have this line of memory or hereditary that goes back to the beginning. So each of us can be traced all the way back to that mitochondrial Eve, that first mythical kind of being, that first woman. And so we go back to the through that line, that lineage, are held all those memories. And my understanding of awakening is that in order to awaken fully, you have to transform and transmute the ancestral wounds and the DNA of entire lineage that you're connected to. So you literally have to clear the whole bloodline, the whole way back to the beginning. And unless you've done that, and until you do that, you can't have that experience of completion and fullness or enlightenment, full-bodied, forever enlightenment, the Christhood. And so with that view, it's a deeper view. It shows that we each hold and carry this kind of responsibility, for our ancestors, and it gives, in a way, I think it gives a really beautiful sense of depth and richness to our life, because we have, yes, it's a heavy weight, it's a heavy load to carry, but we talked just now about forgiveness and the sacrifice. In a way we are all that sacrificial being, and our job is to transmute that for the sake of the whole of humanity, and as much as we can. It's not like we have to kind of kill ourselves doing it. It's as much as we can, as much as we're able to open our hearts and love. And Elizabeth's absolutely right. You don't need to go back and make contact, because the experience is here now. It's in your body. It's in your emotions. It's in your relationships. It's around you in everyday life. So it's in your everyday life that you have to translate it and transmute it. So in the Gene Keys, I created this. Well, I didn't create it. It kind of came. A system, and I'm going to just recommend it to you, because it will really help you I'm not just pitching it, but it will really help you to kind of see that in your life. And it's if you go to my website, you'll get a profile. You can get an instant profile. This this holographic, hologenetic profile, I call it. And what that profile does is it gives you a map. It gives you a wound map, right, of the stages and the specific gene keys that get unlocked in your life. And they get as you do one, as you kind of heal the karma of one, so the next one appears. It's like opening a safe, and you turn like you're a safe cracker or something. You turn it to one way and there's a click, and then you turn it back the other way and there's another click, and then you turn it back the other way again and there's another click, and eventually you get to the final click and the safe opens and the treasure's inside. And our wound patterns are like that. You get through one and there's another one behind it. But that one behind it is connected even further back, and our as a awakening being, our job is to unlock those things. So in the gene keys map on your profile, you'll see this map of codes and gene keys, and then I spent 2 years then or more then writing a guide to that map and creating a program. An online program so I could literally be there and hold the hand of each person as they go through their map, unraveling it in their life. That's why I recorded, all this stuff about that's why I wrote all this stuff and I recorded all this stuff. Otherwise it's like, who is this guy? Why is he doing all this? But I actually recorded it and wrote it all so that people could take individualized journeys and apply specific gene keys to their lives. So you begin at the beginning, and I wrote it very practically, so you have steps. Step one, do this, read this, watch this, focus on this gene key, it's yours, and then understand this. And I can't even tell you the depth it goes into, because there's even more than just the gene keys, because there are very specific things called lines. Every gene key has one of 6 lines. So you might have the 12th gene key, but you have it in the 3rd line. So that's a very specific variation. So you have to go into the text and realize, and that's not in the book even, that's in the program. You go into the lines and they really guide you in deeper. So you take the book and you take, the way I explain it to people is there's 3 components. The book is like the map. The profile is like your compass. And then the program, which is called Golden Path, is like the territory of your life. And so you can use any one of them on their own, but when you pull the 3 together, you have the full journey. And then out of that journey came a community. So the Gene Keys community was born of all people doing the Golden Path, and they're doing it in their life, in their own speed, in their own way, in different countries, and they're all working with it and helping each other. So I really recommend that as a way, because what you may find is that as you contact that community and you get into that work, you will find other people who absolutely understand what you're experiencing, and because they're in the same thing or they're experiencing it in the same way. Plus the guidebooks that come with the program tell you, like, there's specific phases. There's the middle part of the program is called the Venus sequence. It's a sequence that's embedded inside our DNA, and it's about the transmutation of our relationships through positions of planets, when we were born and before we were born, actually. And in that one are contained the codes of our kind of emotional wounding patterns that go all the way back through to ancestral. And they're kind of triggered by but actually astrologically they're triggered by patterns of planets Saturn and other kind of mysterious planets like Chiron and stuff which relate to our ancestral DNA. So when you look and you see, well, which gene keys were triggered when I was born by that planet and its position, what you end up with is a kind of personalized map of your awakening journey and a real mirror, so that you can understand exactly, that's why I experience that particular bodily symptom, or that particular difficult relationship, or that particular challenge when that car hit my car, or whatever it is, at that time, because it's reflecting something deep in my past, in my ancestry, in order that I can heal it. for the whole living chain of beings. And that gives you for me anyway, it makes me sit up and go, wow, I'm here to kind of, I'll take that. I'll take that on. Instead of feeling kind of crushed by it and like, why is this happening? You suddenly have a kind of multi-dimensional reason. So, I recommend that path, since you've had that experience and that memory, and I think it could be really helpful to you. I mean, there may be many other ways, and I could just be simple and say, like Elizabeth, work on forgiveness, and that's actually, that would be enough. So, whichever way is like the one that has the real grip for you. I hope that's helpful, and I used it as a way also. I hope you don't mind of explaining a little bit more about gene keys, but so that other people can also take advantage. So I apologize for that, but
no.
I hope it was helpful.
That too. Yes, thank you,
right.
and I will look into it. Yeah, and Elizabeth, is there anything else you want to add for me?
Well, what's coming up for me, because I remember our session so clearly, is that it was so passionate and beautiful that these grandmothers reached out to you in that moment, in this beautiful spiritual moment, saying, you're the chosen one. We need you. We need you to help us. That this is something that we can all do. That this is the truth. And that, yes, we do experience with incredible precision linear time, but in the cyclical understanding of time, that this was the perfect moment. It couldn't have been anyone else, Beth. It had to be you right now at this time doing that healing on behalf of that incredible, very specific genetic line. And it might seem like a really heavy responsibility, but I don't want you to see it like that. I want you to see it as a wonderful gift that you can really delve deep every single day, looking at that and knowing that you're backed up by this incredible group of people and that they all are looking to you, asking for that service, and that's what we would call karma yoga. It's the yoga of service, the action of service, bringing all that incredible love and light not only into your own life and that healing, which no doubt you will experience, but also the healing on behalf of all these other people in a historical sense. That's why everything has happened the way it has, that things don't just happen randomly. This is all a reflection of the universe. And so I just expanded out to everyone as well, saying a lot of what you experience it's not about fault or blame. It's because this incredible universe is miraculous, and that there's always a reason. There's divine timing, perfect, gorgeous, incredible divine timing, incredible divine imagination, and that what you can imagine into existence, Source has already imagined, and that includes the possibility of total and complete healing of your body, Beth, and of course your genetic line, and that there's going to be this beautiful celebration, this part of yourself as you walk through the journey of healing, that there's going to be more and more every day, more beauty, more celebration, more grace, and more forgiveness, and seeing the power of those cities showing up from Source into your life.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm just super glad you got to come on live.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you both.
Of course. Yeah.
Thanks.
If you would like to ask Richard a question, I'm happy to take one more live question. You can press star 2 if you're a live guest, or you can type it in on the Q&A board. And I just want to thank everyone who has been here spending time with us and absorbing all of this wonderful mystical information. And, of course, thank you, Richard, for illuminating more deeply the entire process. Just super beautiful from me coming into this as with new eyes, and from a younger generation, I get to expand this and be able to share it with my friends and all of the people here on with us. So I bow to you for that. So we have Barbara Heiser. Hi, Barbara. Thanks for coming.
Hi. Thank you. This has been wonderful. I'm a newbie to your whole system, and I want to know, I'm buying the book, and I got the map, and what specific things should I start with as a beginner on your website? There's so much. What would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I think, thanks. It's lovely to meet you. Well, if you go onto the website, there's a page that even says, "Are you new?" or it's on the very, very beginning.
Okay.
And if you click in there, it gives you very simple 3 things, like buy the book, and then get your profile. I don't know if you've got your profile yet. Have you got your profile?
I just did it. Yes.
And then, excellent. So you're looking at that and you're going, what does all this mean? Yeah. And then if you click onto the golden path. Then it'll take you to a place saying, it's in steps. So step 1 gives you like some introductory free materials. Step 1 is the free one, and then you can look into that and you watch a little introduction webinar, and there's some audios about contemplation and some other things that kind of get you oriented. And there's lots of other articles and things you can read that are also free and stuff, so you get a bit of background. Or you can dive into part 1 of the Golden Path, and part 1 is the first 10 steps. And so that's like a little investment, $64. But it's a lot. There's a lot in there. There's basically an ebook in there that's serialized, and then there's all these webinars. I think about 10 of them, and then other resources and audios and things. And it takes you step by step through your profile. It gives you an introduction, where it came from, how it works, and then it says, okay, here's your gene key. It's also personalized, so you put your date in there, and it kind of appears on the screen. And if you don't want to read it all on screen, you can also buy on Amazon the book, which is separate, so for people that don't want to be spending a lot of time on screen, I totally understand.
You mean your book,
so it gives
the book
you
that you're talking about?
Well, there's a small the main book, but there's also a Golden Path. There's 3 little books.
Okay, thank you.
Part 1 of those is in addition. It'll give you like the journey or you can do the online version. It's the same. And through that, you'll be able to begin the journey, and you'll be able to understand what those gene keys mean for you. And also, as I said before, I really recommend you go to the community part of the website and introduce yourself and say, hi, I'm new. And people will, and if you've got any questions, there'll be people there who can kind of direct you places and help you. And, you'll feel at home, I hope. I'm sure you will, because they're a really nice group of people.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Quick question. The Golden Path, the 3 little books, that will refer to specifically what I find on my map.
Yeah, it'll give you the guide.
I can look up when I look at something.
Yeah.
When I look at something on my map, I can refer to it in those books.
Exactly. Well, what you'll get, it'll explain the stages of the map, and then you can use the Gene Keys book to refer to the specific gene key. It might be like mine. First one is 64, so it will tell you what 64 means, but then it will apply that 64 like. Why have you got 64 in this position? And it's your life's work, for example. That might be the one. It's your life's work. And then it'll say, wow, my life's work is that one. And then there are other ones. Your greatest challenge is this one. And it's obviously different for each person. So that's why it's a very personalized journey. But you need those tools so that you can make sense of it all together.
Yes. Oh, thank you. It's just been wonderful. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Good luck with it. And
okay.
Let us know how you get on.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara. Mm-hmm. Good.
It's like a magical journey. You
it
begin,
is,
so.
and it's really wonderfully, deliciously complex. It feeds both of that mystical mind and the logical one.
Yeah.
So yes, an incredible amount of information flowing through. Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
it's reduced to kind of bite-sized chunks. So you just step 1, step 2, step 3. So I empathize with people who are going into and it can feel overwhelming. That's why I sort of broken it down really simply for people.
That's amazing. Yeah, this has been an impressive body of work that you have created, and the website is very beautiful, wonderful energy. And that website, again, everyone, it's genekeys.com. But lots and lots to discover there, and resources, and a living library even, which is very special. But this has been really a wonderful New Earth conversation, Richard. And I just want to, again, bow to you for that, and that you've really helped us understand more about this beautiful fractal dance in the cosmos and how this New Earth is coming together on a very global scale, what we can all do to be able to take advantage of all this light, all these codes, all these changes, incredible amount of support from the inside and the outside. And I just really loved especially the point that you made about how when we're feeling really down or separated or having those dark nights of the soul, that spark, that inner spark that is directly connected to Source never goes out, no matter what. Even if it feels like it is, it'll never go out. And I just really want to end on that and allow all of us to be in that space, to go into our hearts, sense that divine spark. It's ancient, it's wonderful, it's intelligent, and to allow that to come through us in our moment-to-moment experience. From now on, we get to have that. We have that personal opportunity to do that, to heal ourselves, to heal our family lines, to heal our genetics, to have the experience as a sacred human, to be set up for success and oneness. And I know you said, Richard, I'm in. I am too. And so I hope all of you here listening that you'll join in too. It's an opportunity unlike any other. The timing is right. So again, thank you, Richard. You're amazing, and I'm
thank you.
So impressed. So impressed.
Likewise, it's been a real pleasure meeting you and feeling your clarity and the clarity of all those connected to you. And I think you're an amazing vessel yourself for the light. So I look forward to perhaps meeting you one day.
Yes, me too. I really do look forward to that as well. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that this New Earth conversation will resonate and transform your lives as it has mine. And I'm going to continue to learn more about the Gene Keys and to discover this incredible path laid out for us by Richard. So thank you all so much. And if you have any further questions, you can always email me at elizabeth@seerandscientist.com. And, of course, you can reach Richard through his website. And we all look forward to your book. What's it titled, Richard?
Yeah, The Art of Contemplation. Yeah. That'll
Excellent.
be an easier read.
Well, I'm all the light that comes through your writing, it's going to be a treasure, I'm sure. So just really looking forward to all of your future work as well. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. And
Love
take
everyone.
good care.
Okay, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.